Today's lesson is Stones Sparkling and Storied. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we are going to be talking about gemstones or precious stones. And our title is describing them as being stones, sparkling, and storied. So, of course, these are stones. They're precious stones like rubies, sapphires, emeralds, diamonds, etc. And, of course, when light reflects off them, they are sparkling. And they're also storied, which means basically they have a lot of stories, and we can talk about them for a long time.
Absolutely. These stones, these precious gems have been valued by cultures around the world for thousands of years. And so because they have such a long history and a long human fascination with them, of course, they're going to have a lot of good stories, a lot of good myths, legends, and real history connected to these precious stones.
Okay, so let's find out about these precious stones in today's lesson. Let's listen to the first part, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
Stones sparkling and storied. Possessing a brilliance that belies their humble chemistry, gemstones have been casting a spell on us for thousands of years. Throughout history, we have given these colorful rocks special significance as symbols of power, meaningful gifts, and protective charms against ill. Here are some of their stories.
大家好，第一部分我们看到名词 significance， 指特殊意义、含义或是重要性。像是 Our museum guide explained the artistic significance of the drawing. 我们的博物馆导览员解释了这幅画在艺术上的重要性。再举一个例子 I didn't fully understand the significance of global warming until I read this article. 我直到看了这篇文章，才了解全球暖化的重要性。另外，将 significance 字尾的 ce 改成 t， 就变成了形容词 significant， 意思是明显的或是重大的。举例来说 The patient showed significant improvement after taking the medication. 病患采用这种药物治疗之后，显著好转。或是 The final exam will be a significant part of your grade in this class. 期末考会占你们这堂课成绩很重要的一部分。
So again, we're talking about gemstones in today's lesson, and the title again is Stones or Precious Stones. They are sparkling and they are storied with lots of stories to tell us. Now here in the first paragraph it says, possessing a brilliance that belies their humble chemistry, gemstones have been casting a spell on us for thousands of years. So this is our introductory paragraph, and it basically presents the topic to us in a very clever way. It's describing gemstones as possessing a brilliance that belies their humble chemistry. If you possess something, you have something. You might possess some special skills, for example, and you can get a good job and use those skills and make a lot of money. And if you're talking about brilliance, that means the brightness of something. So yes, indeed, when you see gemstones in a jewelry store, they have that brilliance and they sparkle and they're really bright. And that brilliance, well, it belies their humble chemistry. To belie here means to kind of conceal. It doesn't really tell us the whole truth because basically gemstones are just a combination of chemicals.
That's right, because chemistry is what we think of when we think of all the chemicals that make up many things in the world, especially elements, things that come from the earth, things like iron and stuff like that, gold, silver. These are some of the precious metals that we get from the earth, and in the same way, when we combine certain chemicals like carbon with other things, we get some of these precious gems. A lot of you probably know that diamonds are one of the purest forms of carbon possible. So yes, this is chemistry and geology, the forces of the earth working together to create these gemstones that it says have been casting a spell on us for thousands of years, casting a spell on humans for a very long time. When something casts a spell, well, of course, you can think of a witch in a story or Harry Potter casting one of his magical spells. But But in this case, we're not really talking about magic. We're just sort of saying it's kind of created a fascination. People, their behavior changes. They're willing to, for example, spend thousands or millions of dollars on a rock, basically. So it's sort of magical. That's what we're kind of saying. The magic of these precious stones and the sort of fascination and attraction they've had for humans for thousands of years. Throughout history, as we read on, it says, throughout history, we have given these colorful rocks special significance as symbols of power, meaningful gifts, and protective charms against ill. These are some of the examples of how these stones have cast their spell on people. And because of this amazing attractiveness of these stones, we humans have given these colorful rocks special significance. Significance is basically an importance of some kind, maybe an importance above others like it, maybe an importance that doesn't really match what it is. These are, after all, stones, but we're spending millions of dollars on them, and of course we give them as gifts at weddings, and we imagine kings and queens covered in them, so they have a special significance, a special importance as, some examples, symbols of power. There you go. Imagine the Queen of England with the big diamonds on her crown. Meaningful gifts, of course, wedding rings and engagement rings, and protective charms against ill. Yeah, a lot of people believe in the protective power of the colors and the stones they wear. They think if they wear their lucky ruby or whatever, something good will happen to them and they'll stay safe. So here, as we get to the next section of the article, here are some of their stories. And we're going to start looking at some of the different stones and some of the amazing stories and legends and myths connected to them.
We sure are. So let's move on now and talk about rubies. We'll listen to the second part of our lesson right now.
Rubies. Second only to diamonds in their hardness and seeming to contain an eternal fire within them, rubies have in many cultures been symbols of strength and protection. In ancient China, for example, warriors decorated their swords with rubies to keep them safe in battle. And in Myanmar, where many of the world's finest rubies are found, warriors would insert rubies into their own flesh in the belief that the stones made them immune to harm.
第二部分我们看到形容词 eternal， 指永恒的或是永远的。例如 The memorial will be an eternal tribute to soldiers. 这座纪念碑将会是对士兵们的永恒致敬。或是 The evil wizard said that he would plunge the kingdom into eternal darkness. 那位邪恶的巫师说他会让这个王国陷入永恒的黑暗。另外补充这个字的名词 eternity， E-T-E-R-N-I-T-Y eternity， 表示永恒或是不朽。举例来说 The couple promised to love each other for eternity. 那对夫妻承诺对方会永远相爱。
Okay, so first off, we're going to talk about rubies, and that's the plural of ruby. Of course, in Chinese, you just say a red gemstone. It's pretty simple, but we call it a ruby. Second only to diamonds in their hardness and seeming to contain an eternal fire within them, rubies have, in many cultures, been symbols of strength and protection. So, yes, indeed, if you're talking about the hardness of gemstones, well, everybody pretty much agrees that diamonds are the hardest of all the gemstones. So rubies come in second here. They're second only to diamonds in their hardness, and they also seem to contain an eternal fire within them. If something's eternal, it lasts forever. Of course, when you get married to your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you pledge your eternal love to them, that your love will never die. And in this particular case, if you look within a ruby, you can kind of see an eternal fire in there because they're red, and I guess rubies are going to last for billions of years.
That's right. And maybe in your imagination, you can even see a little flame right inside that beautiful stone. And of course, that flame will burn forever. And then it says, in ancient China, for example, warriors decorated their swords with rubies to keep them safe in battle. Well, that's an amazing little historical fact. So if you went back thousands of years to China, you'd find warriors there with jewel-encrusted swords, I guess because they thought that these rubies, these red stones, would keep them safe. Seems like a good reason if you have the money to go out and buy yourself a ruby. Warriors, of course, are soldiers. That's what we're thinking of. Generally, when we use warriors, we're thinking of a more ancient kind of soldier, maybe on a horse, maybe fighting with the sword, something like that. But these are soldiers who used rubies on their weapons to keep them safe in battle. And nearby China, next we read, and in Myanmar, where many of the world's finest rubies are found, warriors would insert rubies into their own flesh in the belief that the stones made them immune to harm. That is an even more incredible story from history. From nearby Myanmar, also sometimes called Burma, of course, which is still today a big source of rubies all around the world. Gem merchants and jewelry makers travel to Myanmar to buy rubies. And back in time, though, back in history, warriors there would do an interesting thing with their rubies. They would insert the rubies into their own flesh. So I'm imagining they're cutting their skin and putting rubies under their skin? Is that the idea here, Roger?
They must have used some kind of surgical technique to insert the rubies into their own flesh. So here we've got the verb to insert. That just means you put something small inside something larger. Most often this is used to talk about putting coins into a vending machine. Insert the coin and then you can get a bottle of tea or something like that. And the old video games, I'm not sure if we still have video game arcades anymore, but if you want to play a video game in a video arcade, you would insert a coin into the machine and then you could start playing.
Interesting. So yes, I imagine they were putting these rubies under their skin in some kind of medical or surgical technique. And their belief was, this is what they believed, in the same way that the Chinese warriors believed the rubies on their swords would help them stay safe. The Burmese, or the troops, the warriors from Myanmar, believed that the rubies under their skin would make them immune to harm. If you're immune to something, that basically means it can't hurt you. It can't harm you in any way. We take vaccines, for example, to be immune to things, or if someone is trying to tempt you to break your diet by offering you a delicious piece of chocolate cake, you could say, I'm immune to your temptations and your tricks. As much as you might try, it's not going to work. I'm going to fight against it. I have all the defenses I need. So I guess these jewel-encrusted warriors from Myanmar believed that with the power of the ruby, they could go off to battle and be completely fine. Nothing would hurt them. They are immune to harm, danger, or injury.
But, of course, if you insert a ruby into your skin, it won't make you immune to the coronavirus, so don't be fooled that way. And rubies, of course, are probably given as gifts, but I don't think I've ever heard of anybody giving a ruby as an engagement ring, but it is possible. You don't always have to use the diamond. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Now let's move on and talk about the green gemstone, emeralds.
Emeralds. Giving off a rich green glow that suggests wealth and abundance, emeralds have historically been prized by the rich and powerful. Indeed, one of history's most famous emerald lovers was the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra, who regularly adorned both herself and her palace with them. In 2011, an emerald pendant brooch, once belonging to the actress Elizabeth Taylor, who famously played Cleopatra in a 1963 film of the same name, sold for $6.5 million, showing that time has clearly not diminished the stone's value.
"第三部分我们看到单字 abundance， 这个字是名词，指丰富、充足或是大量。举例来说 ，In France, you can find an abundance of wine and cheese。在法国，你可以找到大量的红酒和起司。或是 Corn grows in abundance in certain parts of the United States。美国某些地区盛产玉米。另外，将 abundance 字尾的 ce 换成 t 就变成了形容词 abundant， 表示大量的或是丰沛的。例如 Only 100 years ago, blue whales were abundant in the world's oceans. 不过100年前，蓝鲸在全世界海洋中的数量还很多。也可以说 The region's abundant sunshine makes it ideal for growing wine grapes. 这个地区充足的日照使其成为种植酿酒葡萄的理想地点。最后我们看到单字 diminish， 这个字是动词，指减少、降低或是贬低。举例来说 As the years passed, the movie star's influence diminished and her popularity faded. 随着一年一年过去，那位电影明星的影响力已变少，他的人气也逐渐减弱。或是 Scientists hope the new invention will diminish pollution caused by cars. 科学家希望这项新发明能降低汽车造成的污染。
Okay, so as promised, now we're going to talk about emeralds, and here's how we describe them. Giving off a rich green glow that suggests wealth and abundance, emeralds have historically been prized by the rich and powerful. So again, this describes emeralds. They give off a rich green glow. So here we've got the verb phrase to give off. You could also say they emit this. It comes from the emerald. You see it coming from an emerald. You get this rich green glow, especially if the lighting is nice and if the emerald has been cut in a very exquisite way. And if you see that green light coming off the emerald, well, that suggests wealth. It suggests that you are rich, and it also suggests abundance. Abundance, of course, means you got a lot of stuff. That's what everybody hopes for at Chinese New Year. I think there's a phrase, every year there is fish. We'll have an abundance of fish every year, although fish is not really what they're talking about there, but you get the idea.
That's right. More than you could possibly need, as if you're very wealthy and you have more money than you possibly need. So, of course, that means that emeralds have historically been prized or greatly valued by the rich and powerful. Now, when we think of rich and powerful, we often think of world leaders, don't we? Well, let's turn to one of those. It says, indeed, one of history's most famous emerald lovers was the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra, who regularly adorned both herself and her palace with them. Wow, not only did she have jewels on her own body, in the form of jewelry, I suppose, but her palace, the grand house or building or place where she lived there in Egypt, it was also covered in emeralds. That's quite a home decoration technique. So she's a famous emerald lover, this Queen Cleopatra, who I'm sure most of you have heard of, and she adorned herself. When you adorn yourself, basically you're putting on clothing of some kind, probably rather fancy clothing, maybe for a special occasion. You might adorn yourself in your best clothes to go to a fancy ball or a fancy party. A lady might adorn herself with all of her best jewelry, too. So it's kind of like decorating your own person, your own body. And then we read, in 2011, an emerald pendant brooch, once belonging to the actress Elizabeth Taylor, who famously played Cleopatra in a 1963 film of the same name, sold for $6.5 million, showing that time has clearly not diminished the stone's value. A brooch is basically a pin. It's a jewelry piece, but it's not something you wear on your body like earrings or rings or necklaces. You basically pin it to your clothing, so it can be a little larger, it can be a little more well-designed or something like that, more interestingly designed. And a pendant would probably be like a gem hanging off the bottom of the brooch. Often when we think of a pendant cut for a gem, we think of kind of that tear-shaped cut that you might see on a necklace. And Elizabeth Taylor, of course, played Cleopatra, the ancient queen, in a Hollywood movie in 1963 with, of course, famously Richard Burton playing Mark Antony. So she owned this beautiful pendant, Elizabeth Taylor. This beautiful pendant sold for $6.5 million just a few years ago, about 10 years ago. But this shows, as the article says, as we reach the conclusion, that time has clearly not diminished the stone's value. So just as the real Egyptian Queen Cleopatra greatly valued emeralds, so the Hollywood queen, I guess you could say the actress Elizabeth Taylor, she also valued emeralds. So their value has not as clearly not diminished. When something diminishes, it gets less importance. It goes down in value. We talk about stocks or assets diminishing. If you pay a certain amount for an investment and then 10 years later it's worth less than you paid, then the value of that investment has diminished. But stones, these precious stones like emeralds and rubies, they do very rarely diminish in value. They usually grow in value, which is part of the other reason why people have had a long fascination with them.
Right, so maybe you could consider investing in gemstones as a way to make money, and the value will not diminish over time, hopefully. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's listen now to our dear Chinese teacher, Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一句有提到 Gemstones have been casting a spell on us for thousands of years. 宝石数千年来让我们着迷不已。这边他用到 cast a spell on somebody 是指说使什么着迷或是对什么施了魔咒的那种意思。那这边他用到时态是现在完成进行式，我们要来学习它的用法。现在完成进行式，它的形式是 have been 加上现在分词 VING， 这表示说某个动作或是状态从过去开始一直延续到现在还没有结束，强调仍然持续进行中，也就是一直都在做某事的那种意思。那它可以搭配 for 加一段时间，也可以去搭配 since 加上过去某个时间点的名词或是子句。我们就来看两个例句哦。Jenny has been reading the novel for hours. Jenny 一直在看那本小说，已经看了好几个小时，现在都还正在一直看哦。Jenny has been reading the novel since this morning. Jenny 从今天早上就一直在看那本小说，看到现在都还在看。好，那我们也顺便复习一下现在完成式。现在完成式它的形式是 have 加上过去分词 PP。那这个时态呢，则是用来表达某个动作或状态到现在为止已经持续或存在一段时间了。那它也可以搭配 for 加一段时间，或是去搭配 since 加上表达过去某个时间点的名词或子句。举例来说 Benny has changed a lot since I last saw him. 自从我上一次见到他以后呢 Benny 改变了很多。那在这边 since I last saw him 就是自从我上次见到他，这边表明一个时间点，从那时起他变得很多。好，课文第三部分的最后一句，他有写到说Time has clearly not diminished the stone's value. 时间显然没有减损宝石的价值。文中是用到动词 diminish 来表达减少、降低的意思。那我们也来补充它的字首字根。当你看到 min 或者是 mini 这一类的字根呢，它就带有小的意思。在 diminish 这个字当中，它的字首 di 是源自于字首 di 的变形，在这边表示完全，用来做强调用。那么字根 min 表示小， ish 是动词字尾，合在一起 diminish 就有减少、缩减、降低的意思，就会跟 decrease, lessen, lessen 这个 lesson 或者是 reduce 差不多，表达那种降低的意思。顺便补充几个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 minister， 它的字首 mini 表示小的， ster 表示人，合在一起不是说是个小人哦，而是指说小的人，地位低下的人，也就是仆人、侍者。那后来这个字被借来指大臣，大臣就好像是帝王的侍者嘛，那这边就可以联想到说 minister 它有大臣啊、部长的意思了吧。第二个补充的是 minimal， 它的字根 minim 表示小， al 是形容词字尾，合在一起 minimal 就表示极小的、最小限度的。如果把字尾 al 改成最高级形容词字尾 um， 就会得到 minimum， 那就可以表达是最小的、最低的意思了。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Possess。Martin possesses many qualities that make him a good leader. Chemistry. Our pollution has changed the chemistry of Earth's atmosphere. Significance. I didn't understand the significance of her remark until much later. Eternal. If you drink from this cup, you will gain eternal youth. Warrior. The warriors got on their horses and rode out of the city gates. Insert. Insert the coin into the machine and then press the start button. Immune. Susie has seen so many beggars that she is now immune to their suffering. Diminish. The heavy rain did not diminish the beauty of the coast.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.